2709 Setting Sun Drive, Corona del Mar, California, 92625. I know some facts, but they don't make my mother any less of a mystery. She grew up in London during the war. She told me that bombs sometimes fell on her playground. She married an American GI, moved to Hollywood, divorced him, and met my father. When I was little, she talked about her first husband as if he'd been a tree branch fallen on a path, something she'd gotten around so she could be free to meet my dad. She told the stories of more recent times with leisure and nuance. It was as if everything that had happened in England was marked by fog and switchback trails overgrown with nettles. Everything in America was easily mapped, obstacles met and overcome, culminating, she wanted me to know, in my birth. "You were wanted," she said often, emphasizing the first and last words of the sentence. I grew up in Corona del Mar, south of Los Angeles, in a house that faced the sunsets. I can't imagine how different it was for my mother from her childhood. She didn't fit in. She looked like she should. Long blonde hair, slender body, kind blue eyes, skin that tanned easily. But she was German blonde, European stock, a stranger here, something her body knew well. She was a little deaf, and when she didn't understand what someone said, she looked at them with curiosity that made her seem alien. She had a modest two-piece swimsuit of pale blue, insulated with many layers of material between its exterior and where it touched her body. Its bottom piece reached above her navel, the better to cover a mysterious curved scar on her back that when I was very young I would touch with my fingertips to try to understand the different ways skin could feel. When she herself was 4 years old, she'd been in the hospital for many months. No one had told her why. When she came to the United States, a doctor saw the scar and asked her why she'd had a kidney removed. She didn't know she was missing a kidney. How disconcerting it must have been to hold in her mind both her Gothic childhood and her present life of coastal breezes, sunglasses, money in the bank, her own swimming pool, going barefoot at cocktail parties. How even in winter time her friends would pick fruit from their backyards, make bowls of sangria, and greet her at their front doors with a happy "Mi casa es su casa." Because it was Southern California, we took long drives almost every day. I learned that when we went by a pasture, if you relaxed your eyes and let the fence posts rush by, the tiny flickers of the sights beyond would resolve into glimpses of the farm. That's what it was like with my mother's past life. She sewed clothing for me. She made me tuna melts for lunch. When I couldn't sleep, she sat on my bed and sang Moon River. She read up on ESP and decided she and I had it. I used to lie on my bed and try to send out brainwaves to my mother. SOS! Sometimes, on a different day, she would come into my room and ask if I had just been calling her. And I always said yes, and she would nod significantly, admitting to a seasonal wind only she and I knew about. I was hers then. I loved my father, but I belonged to my mother. She was very funny and knew how to be silly when I was little, and witty when I was a little older. But I knew a look on her face, an expression that needed to be solved, because it wasn't anything like ease. Under big canvas reflective hats, zinc oxide on our noses, sunscreen on our shoulders, we hiked at the beach in our swimsuits, exploring the tide pools, dipping our big toes into sea anemones for the thrill of feeling them latch on, and something was wrong. When I learned how to swim beneath an approaching swell, I popped up safely, and yet my mother's concerned eye fell on me with a weight I didn't understand. Back on shore, she reached for my hand as if there were a border crossing only she could see, and there were armed guards whose graces she would have to court with politeness and fear. Her silent gaze, if it could be translated, said, "You don't know what you escaped." And because her worry lingered, it might come back. I can see why she liked my father. His family was a block of Russian Jews, a solid, basalt steady heredity. They were simply Russian Jews as far back as there had been deer in that particular forest. Then the Jews moved to Chicago and opened a hardware store, and things got better. And there was the sense that everyone was spreading out in similar directions, upward, onward. My great-grandfather had been a rabbi in a shtetl overrun by Cossacks. My grandfather ran G&M Hardware on 58th and Calumet. My uncles were lawyers. My father was an engineer. He traveled much of the year because he was making money for our future. That was a new matching pair of gifts for her, his easy confidence that there would be both money and a future. His family's trajectory of abundance was easier to hang on to than whatever Hydra's head of worry was on my mother's side. It must have been seductive for a while. When I was 6, I asked my mother to explain the world map. What country fit where? It was hard to comprehend where England was in relationship to, say, Israel. When my mother pointed out their great distances, both from us and from each other, I felt desolate. I had so wanted Israel and England to be next door. I couldn't explain why. "It's normal," she said. "When you're young, you think the world revolves around you. You'll start expanding outward. A young person thinks the world revolves around his country. When you're grown up, you'll see how the whole world fits together." "What about now?" I asked. "You're self-centered." I thought about that. Is that good? Only someone who is self-centered would ask that. She said this with love, I should mention. Around the same time, I'd added up a column of numbers faster than she had. Then I'd said to her, "It's okay, Mommy's brain is slow." So that's what she was up against. Our development was called Harborview Hills. When we drove its gentle curves, it was in a new Mercedes 300 SEL on freshly poured streets that fanned out like the veins in palm fronds. When a road stubbed out in a cul-de-sac, its edges touched emptiness, scrub, and raw earth. History only extended back 5 years or so. In the early 1960s, in Corona del Mar, Orange County, California, the landscape was all fields and open rolling hills, and as the seasons turned, it was like money rained down upon the earth.